Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's a couple minutes after. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're calling from. Thank you for joining today's webinar entitled Making Virtual and Hybrid Events Pay, How to Price and How to Sell. My name is Jeff Joseph, and I'm president of the Software and Information Industry Association, otherwise known as SIIA. And we know that the disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic has many SIA members wondering what the future events will look like and how companies whose business strategies relied upon in-person convenings can survive and thrive in a world where people are interacting virtually. We are pondering those same questions here at SIA ourselves. To answer these questions and more, SIA is excited to announce our partnership with PCMA, the world's largest platform for business event strategists. PCMA has a wealth of intelligence and resources about planning successful events, both in person and online, and we're happy to be able to share some of this with you. Beginning with today's webinar, we will be discussing how to effectively organize, execute, and monetize digital and hybrid events. We're honored today to be joined by two experts. Leslie Bailey is an education manager with PCMA and is part of the strategic planning and production team behind PCMA's Digital Experience Institute webinars and the Digital Event Strategist course. Leslie has over 10 years of digital event experience as both a planner and producer. Also with us is Meg Fazy, an internationally renowned expert in event strategy and audience engagement, and the principal at sponsorship marketing agency Phase Forward. She has worked with some of the biggest brands you know, spanning several markets, including hotel industry associations, event technology, and strategic partnerships. Meg is best known for motivating sales and marketing teams, driving strategy, and connecting people. So we'll begin today with presentations from Leslie and Meg, and then I'll come back to moderate some Q&As. Due to the number of participants in this webinar, we're only able to field questions that are entered in the Q&A box. So please enter your questions by clicking the Q&A icon, and we'll get through to as many as possible. And thank you for your patience and understanding. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Leslie Bailey to kick us off. And thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for having us, everybody. We are super happy to be here, especially to talk about what is on the forefront of everybody's mind about going digital and how exactly you do that, but more importantly, how you price it and how you sell it in order to get that ROI and that revenue. So again, my name is Leslie Bailey, education manager with PCMA. And I want to start out with today just kind of talking about how you decide to start and when to go digital, because it's a really big decision. And as we all know, it has been a little bit quick for a lot of us to decide when exactly and how we're going to do that. So when I do the course and when I do Digital Experience Institute webinars, we talk a lot about digital events, focused content. And I always like to start with these questions because the biggest thing you've probably heard us say, and we've heard this in our industry as well, is everybody is trying to recreate their physical event in a digital event environment. That is the number one issue. You can't do that. You can't have the same exact experience you would have had at a face-to-face in a digital platform. You can try your hardest. It's not always going to be that way. And if you're setting that expectation for your attendee, that they're going to have the exact same experience, the expectations, the feedback, the satisfaction is going to be vastly different than it would have at your face-to-face. So I always tell everybody, think of it as a brand new event. Think of it as something new that you're doing because it is something new that you're doing. You haven't gone digital before. And it's definitely something new for a lot of people that I've had conversations with. So I always, when I look at it, I start with these questions. How many upcoming events do you have lined up for the remainder of the year and early 2021? Because as we all know, we've all been watching our various news channels, talking with each other, giving opinions of when we think we're going back. And we honestly just don't know. I've had so many conversations with people about hybrid events and digital. Should I go hybrid, which would be your physical is still happening and you have a live stream component to that? Or should I go fully digital because we won't be going back? And it's a hard question, right? You don't exactly know. It depends on your meeting size. So I encourage people to look at your upcoming events in the calendar year and really look at the content or the goals that you have for that. What is the attendee getting out of your event that they could get in a digital event setting? And then also look at it this way as, if that can't be recreated digitally, should we really do a digital event for that specific event? So looking at your upcoming agendas, your upcoming annual meetings, you should really look at what you can do digitally, what that satisfaction and feedback would be, so that you're still regaining that connection, extending that reach, but you're still getting that satisfaction and that attendee experience that you are promising. And early 2021, I realize how far off that sounds at the moment, but you need to evaluate early 2021 as well, especially if you are looking at any international events or traveling, because that is going to be our number one thing that we have to look at in the early part of the year. Who's going to travel, who's allowed to travel, and how safe do they feel doing that, where you might have to go fully digital with your event. Again, what are your goals for participating as an attendee? And that's something you very much want to look at, because if you can recreate it, if you can make sure they're hitting all those goals, they want to come back to a digital event, they had a great experience with it, they're going to, because you might have to put digital events into your portfolio for, let's say, 3 to 5 years, or maybe it just becomes your plan B. So you really want to maintain and look at those products, look at those different digital event providers when you are doing any product demo calls, or if you are just doing your own research, what features that they have that would be able to reach those goals for your attendee. Do my events include sponsors, which is what Meg is going to talk about in just a little bit. That's the biggest question I get right now, is if you've never done a digital or live stream, you have no idea how you can incorporate your sponsors or your exhibitors. It's very hard to understand that if you've never seen it and if you've never done it. It is doable. Meg is going to talk all about that. And I will tell you, with digital event platforms, with a lot of them, there are different benefits and features you can include. And you should be thinking about them, because they are going to bring in some of that revenue and that ROI. They very much want to connect with your attendees, your audience as well. So you do need to think about them in your top list of questions when you are planning out how you're going to plan and produce a digital event, and if you're going to. And how do you include them, and what do they get out of that? Because you have to be the seller of that. You have to know exactly what you're talking about, what they're going to get out of it. You won't always be able to have stats that you can give them. However, you can give them other client experience so they can hear how it went for other sponsors and exhibitors. And the tech level knowledge of your audience. This is big. Not everybody always knows this right off the bat, but it's easy to do research with different surveys about attending digital events and their comfort level with that, because you have to make it easy for people to attend and navigate. Your user platform has to be very easily accessed. I don't want to run into any issues, which I realize how impossible that sounds, but you really want to look for that. And knowing the tech level knowledge base of your audience is going to help you design your event. It's also going to help you forge a relationship with your digital event provider, as in they know what that tech level knowledge base is and can make recommendations based off of that knowledge. So knowing how comfortable they are with technology, how much they navigate it, how much they use it every day. Even everyday use is something you want to get as research or stats from them, because if they're used to using technology, which I hope by this point we all are, because that's what we're relying on, then they're going to be more comfortable kind of navigating around your event and figuring it out for themselves as well. And the million-dollar question, will our participants pay for content? And how do you start to assess your content to create or establish value for that? So you always want to look at what you're offering them. Are you offering it for only one day? It's one day access. It's kind of a call to action and urgency that they can only get it for that one day. Or are you building a content library to where they can access this on demand and be able to have access to that content to where they might be more motivated to pay for that, because they know they can go back, they can maybe download it, and they can have access to that to reference at a later time, instead of just one day where maybe their schedules do not fit your digital event. When you start to look at how you assess content, that's a different story. We all know we have quality content, and we're going to push that. That's how you promote your event, is your quality content, your speakers. But you really want to look at what you would have charged there at your physical event. And I want to say you're going to have to cut that in half. I'm sure Meg might cover that a little bit, but that's something else you have to look at, is will they pay for content? Have they paid for it in the past? And then assessing your content value for maybe your speaker names or your different topics that might be trending that they can get nowhere else. So those are the top questions I start with when I tell everybody who's going digital for the first time, what you need to think of and what you really need to include. So the second part to this is more hope. I love to put hope out there, because everybody thinks if they don't have a digital team, they cannot produce a digital event. Not true. My colleague, Caitlin, and myself, we plan our digital events. We do them with just us two. Granted, we have a little bit of help, but it's us two planning and producing that to make it a successful event. So you really, what the resource and reality of it is, look inwards at your teams, because typically on your internal teams, or maybe even in your organization, somebody has digital event skill sets that you don't know about, or that they're possibly not using for their current role, that I'm sure they would love to use in order to help with this circumstance. So I always tell everybody to look at your team and really kind of pick out different skill sets they have, or look at the current role they have and how it could transform into a digital role. So for example, on here, and this is available on our site in case anybody wants to download it, I gave you examples of face-to-face planners, different roles on the left side, and then on the right, I have what they could be on your digital event dream team. So a meeting planner just translates to an event manager. And most of those, you're managing timelines, budgets, and the overall team. You're pretty much doing a lot of the similar things you would have done for your physical face-to-face event. And then different things like client services managers, social media managers, those marketing teams, they can really help you when it comes to those engagement activities that you want to have featured in your digital event. So really putting it out there as an open conversation, even if it's, let's say, an open call of who has these skills or who would like to do this and can do this, you can really build up your team very, very easily when it comes to just having the conversation of who might already have those skills. So I just wanted to start out with talking about going digital, how I know I make it sound easy, and if you have any questions, we're here to answer those. But I want to get to the meat and the potatoes that everybody always asks about, and that's getting that revenue, including sponsors, and generating that ROI. So I'm going to hand it over to Meg Fazy to talk us through sponsorships and generating revenue.
Thanks, Leslie. I appreciate it. All right, let's talk about money. I talk really quickly, and there's a lot of information to go through, and I want to get to questions because that's really where we get a lot of information. But to Leslie's point, you have to step back and ask yourself some questions, and one of them is, is there room in my virtual event for sponsors? And that's really going to depend on how you structure your virtual event. So if you have a 3-day conference, are you creating enough of a virtual event to be able to fit sponsors in? So you have to look at that. The way I look at this is I break down my sponsors into brand sponsors, expo sponsors, or experiential sponsors. So the brand sponsor, technical difficulties here, give me 1 second. It does not want to forward. Leslie, can you forward my slide? Thank you. So with the brand sponsors, those are those sponsors who want to put their name to something. They just want to put their logo on something, name recognition. When you're moving them over from a live event or an in-person event to a digital event, they're the easiest ones to go, right? Because you can give them a lot of eyeballs on their brand. And what's great about it is with digital, you can give them something that they can't get in person, which is analytics. So you can tell them, how many people have clicked on their logo. There's a lot of analytics you can give around for the brand sponsor. So when you're moving a brand sponsor from an in-person to a virtual event, it's the easiest sell, right? The other thing with brand sponsors is that it's more than just years ago it would be just a logo on a navigation page or a banner ad on top of the home screen. But now there's so much more that they can have available to them. You can create microsites and send out direct messaging that's branded. One of my favorite things is a swag room, and creating you create a virtual swag room, and you can get that sponsored, and the branding is amazing opportunity. Polling. Can you advance, Leslie? For some reason, it's not working on my end. Thanks. Social media opportunities, mobile apps, pop-up banners. I mean, there's a million opportunities here. Digital live scribing. If you haven't heard of it, it's pretty cool. It's an artist sitting in one of your sessions and actually creating an illustration of the content that can be branded. So there's just a lot more information or a lot more opportunities for the brand sponsor than there used to be. And again, there's analytics where you don't get that in person. So if we're moving on to the expo sponsor, next slide, please. So the expo sponsor is probably the more difficult sponsor to move over from in-person to virtual. And it's really because, you know, they want to be able to pull someone out of the aisle, shake some hands, give demos, you know, sell their product, get to know, have that face-to-face interaction. And I've been in the meetings and events industry for over 20 years, and I will never tell you that there is anything better than a face-to-face interaction. There just isn't. So, but there is some really incredible value that they can get, that an expo sponsor can get in an expo digital event. So what's good about the about having an expo in you, if you have an expo in your in-person event, moving that to a virtual, is it's very scalable. So you can have everything from a simple link where attendees click on it and it's a directory of sponsors, and you click on the sponsor and it gives them, you know, a link to their website or whatever. Very simple, very easy to do, to a 3D type of experience where you create your the attendees an avatar, you create your own avatar, you walk into what looks like the skin of a convention center or venue. You look around and you can see the expo room over here and the keynote room over here, and you walk towards the expo room and you walk into the expo room and you can see different size booths. And so you can still keep your tiers. So if you do a bronze to a platinum level, you can still have that in the virtual 3D world. And I click into what looks like a larger booth, and that's my platinum sponsor, and they can have everything in there from all their documents downloaded. They can do live demos, they can do live chats, they can all kinds of things. All the bells and whistles would go into that, where your bronze sponsor, your smaller booth in the 3D Expo, may only have the availability to have attendees download documents. So it's very scalable. You can scale the size of the expo, and then you can scale within the expo itself. But there's a lot of opportunities. You can create an expert bar, and you invite your top sponsors into have live chats in an expert bar. So there's a lot of things you can do. And what's really amazing about it is that it gives you some really great analytics. So not only do you get the click-throughs, but now you get dwell time. And dwell time is really important because it tells you where people are willing to spend their time. So dwell time is, how long did someone stay in my booth? How long did they look through the documents? How long did they take in a demo? And that tells the sponsor a lot of great information. And then the other thing is, like with an expert bar or something like that, you can really see what people are asking. And then also with like all the documents you would put up, what documents are they downloading? What information is important to the attendees? So it gives you a lot of information. Again, not the same as live, different, but still offers some great value that you can't actually get in live. So, and then the one thing that's really important is, some people say, well, I want to be able to, lead generation is number one important. That's why I have an expo. I would argue that you get better lead generation in a virtual atmosphere, because when people are just walking by your booth and you're kind of pulling them in, are they qualified? Are they a targeted market? You don't know that, right? But if you let the attendee drive that, and they're the one asking for the live demo, and they're the one that went to your booth, that's a targeted lead. So I think it's a pretty cool option there. Next one, Les. So experiential, I think, the experiential sponsor is, I think, very excited about going virtual. There's so many cool opportunities. I work with a couple associations where I create their sponsorship strategy, create their prospectuses and sell. And then I also do a lot of work with technology companies. And so right now I'm in the middle of working with a couple groups where we are moving them, both associations and tech companies, moving them from a in-person event to a digital experience. And the experiential sponsor is so excited about it because they understand analytics. And they also understand that you can do some really cool things in virtual. For one, I'll give you a couple of examples. For one, we are doing a virtual lunch where we have sent out Groupon coupons to the top 250 attendees, 250 first registrants. And it's all sponsored from a sponsor who is going to create a lunchroom. And so those 250 people will go into one lunchroom and have conversation. They're going to play some games and things while they're having their lunch. So they will, I'm sorry, I said Groupon and I meant Grubhub. And you can do a DoorDash or whatever, whichever one. So we're doing a virtual lunch. We're doing we're sending out care packages where with different sponsored items in the care packages. I hired a company called teambuilding.com where we're sending out an afternoon snack, and it's a tiny s'more kit. So people are getting a graham cracker with a marshmallow, a little tiny candy, and some chocolate, a candle and some chocolate. And we're creating s'more. People will be creating s'mores all at the same time, and we're going to be talking about some ghost stories and things like that online. So there's a lot of opportunity for experiential for both associations and corporations. We're doing it for both. And one of the trends that I'm seeing is that when all of this started happening and everybody moved to virtual, one of the really important factors was, especially in the association world, is we want to keep our community strong. We have a really strong group of attendees and they come for the networking, and we want to be able to offer them the networking. Well, this is where you offer it. This is where it works out well for sponsors, where you are, and the attendees, where you can offer some opportunities for attendees to get together and have fun, or have peer-to-peer chats, or really create and continue that community. It's in the experiential world. So next. So just here's some other opportunities that I've done. Snack breaks and bingos, happy hours. Streaming parties are big, especially when we start getting into the hybrid world. One of the things I want to jump into is the pricing aspect. So I get the pricing question a lot. How do we price? Both how do we price our event and how do we price our sponsorship? And I'm going to bust a lot of bubbles here right now and tell you there's no tried true way. I hear a lot of this 25% off rule of thumb. And I will tell you, I looked at that. I implemented that a little bit in the beginning of all this, but found very quickly that was not the way to go. There's some good questions I think you have to ask yourselves in order to get to the right pricing. So, what is your ultimate goal? Is it revenue? Is it attendees? And that sounds like a simple question, but I'll tell you, as an example, all the associations I know that are going digital are charging. All the technology companies that I know of are not charging. So they are not charging for their events. However, they are charging for any specific type of training or certification classes, and that's where they're charging. So what is the ultimate goal of having the event? And what are your break-even costs? I think it's important to know, what are your break-even costs, and how strong of an event do you have? Have you had events for the last 20 years or the last, 3 years, and you have a really strong attendee base and a really strong sponsorship base, and that you can price accordingly where the sponsors will show up because the attendees are going to show up? Or is this a 1 or 2 year event, or do you have a ton of competition out there and you're not sure that's going to happen? How strong your event has to be a variable, and I think it's one that's people don't really think about too often. Competitors, what's your competition doing? I think that is really important because I, as a sponsor, if I'm sponsoring at your event, I'm probably sponsoring at your competitors' events as well. And then the other thing is this a one-time virtual, or do you plan on just doing this because it's 2020 or 2021? Or do you plan on implementing this as an ongoing strategy? So those are some aspects or variables to take into account when you're looking at pricing. And a lot of people will say to me, well, it's hard to price sponsorships because there's not a hard cost. There is a hard cost. You're paying for a platform. You have resources that you have to pay. And the problem is you just have to back into that a little differently than you do when you're doing an in-person event. And you can say definitively, my coffee break costs ABC, or, you know. So I think it's a little more difficult, but it can be done. And I think when it comes to pricing, if you have an opportunity to play with pricing, most organizations don't, but some do. And if you can try them out, or if you have a focus group or an advisory board, run by some pricing opportunities there as well. So those are my ideas on pricing. And I think that's it for now. I'm dying to get back into questions. I think we just kind of hit the layer, and then I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions.
Yeah, I hope we generated a lot and give you a lot of ideas too, because I think this is a really easy time to start being very creative about what you can incorporate in a digital environment. So I think we probably generated some questions. So Jeff, I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, first, thank you both, Meg and Leslie. That was fantastic. We do have a number of questions, but that was very insightful and a great way to kick this off. I'll start with sort of a fundamental question, but a couple of people have asked this. So can you explain in greater detail what a swag room is?
Oh, yes, I get this. I have to say, pricing is my first question. Swag is my second question. So instead of going to an in-person conference and having a conference bag where you get your water bottle and you walk up and down the aisle and you get your branded thumb drive and your branded, cozy or whatever, you can actually create that online. So I work with two companies. One is called Cultivate, one is called Swag Guru. There's a ton of companies out there that do this, but you can actually create a virtual swag room. So you can still sell the thumb drive as a sponsorship or the water bottle as a sponsorship. And then I, as an attendee, get an email that says you've been invited to go shopping in the swag room. And I click on a link, and if ABC company branded it, ABC company's all over the skin of this, and I get to go shopping. Those items are in there, and I can take everything, or I can click on just what I want, and it gets shipped to me. And it's also a very the other really fun thing to do is as a sponsor, I can say I would like to send your board a gift, and I want to spend $100 on each person, and the company will help me pick out 10 items that are $100, and then an email goes out to the board saying Phase Forward would like to has sent you a gift, and they go in and they pick one item. And that's fun because it's a customized, curated shopping event, right? People love that. So that's a swag room.
That's awesome. That sounds really fun. When you described a lot of really interesting experiential opportunities that you've seen and they're providing, are you finding that the sponsor dollars are supporting those experiential opportunities, those events?
They are, and selling virtual right now is not easy. The key to selling virtual sponsorship right now is really, hopefully, having had a great relationship with your sponsors to begin with. So if you've been treating your sponsors like partners all these years, as opposed to just kind of cash cows, you should really be able to have that conversation. I'm working with an organization, DocuSign is one of my clients, and I work with them, and I've created their sponsorship prospectus and sell for the last 3 years, and I know the sponsors, and I'm able to call them because they all do demos. That's their big sponsorship is they all like to do demos. So now I have to move them into a virtual demo aspect. And so I can have those conversations knowing what their needs are, and they know me, and they know what DocuSign wants to provide for them. So it's a good relationship. Selling virtual is not easy. right now, but if you understand the value you can bring, and more importantly, you understand what the sponsor needs are, then you can have some really good conversation and create good opportunities for them, and they feel like they're getting value.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. I hope I'm going to get this question right, but let me try to summarize. And I think it's essentially about, how do you compete with free, I think is where it sort of ends up. But asking about if going back to the pricing, and how do you determine between holding a full virtual conference versus a 1-hour webinar? Trends and perspectives on doing that sort of series of paid webinars compared to doing half or full paid virtual conference. And Bruce, if I fumble that question, please feel free to put it in the webinar chat.
Yeah, Leslie, do you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I think it depends on really how much content you've got and how evergreen it is. Because if you're looking at kind of trending topics or something that is, let's say, hot right now, then you obviously, if you have multiple sessions of that, would want to do, let's say, a half day. I won't say a 1 day, because no one wants to stay on for 8 hours. I think we've probably talked about that before. So I would say a half day of content. If a lot of your multiple sessions are trending topics that may not be able to sustain being in an on-demand library and still be relevant. If you have content, and I always tell people this, to look at what you can rebroadcast after your live event day, whether it's an event or a webinar. If you have a lot of content that can sustain weeks or months, definitely drip that out, because that's going to further your connection and extending your reach. But it's really looking at your content, what it's about. If it's evergreen, I recommend extending it over 1-hour webinars, or maybe one-hour sessions, whatever you want to call them. But if it's content that's really going to be great right now and not so great in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it might seem outdated, I would do a half day of sessions.
That's outstanding. Thank you. Let's see. This may come up in the chat too, but do you have a listing, or is there a place to find a listing of recommended virtual conference platform vendors?
That's the $1,000,000 question,
thumbs
isn't
up
it?
list, right?
We've never gotten that question.
We found a new business opportunity. Maybe we can monetize this and share it. And
yes. We don't currently have a list, because if any of you are out there doing your research, I think even my course candidates tell me about a new platform vendor every day. I've literally heard of a new one, maybe every week or so, that I haven't even looked at. So we don't exactly have a list. That is something that we're working on to get. But I don't think anybody, and I could be wrong, has a comprehensive list right now, because so many platforms are appearing, and so many technology companies that maybe didn't have a platform before are now building them and putting them out.
And it also depends on what you want from that platform. So I can give you a list, but it won't really, you'll still have to go through and research.
That's a great point. That's another question. Is how do you differentiate? Like what do you need to consider as you look at platforms? Obviously we talked about the half day, full day conference versus the webinars, but there are other factors one should look at when evaluating the platforms.
Yeah, I think you should look at what you're trying to do. So like Meg was saying, if you're having exhibitors or sponsors, you're probably going to look like at a more robust platform that actually has that feature and functionality. Whereas if you're really just doing content, and you're really just looking for people to come and absorb that education, you're not really looking for that engagement, you could look at something like this, like a Zoom or a WebEx or something like that, where it's where you kind of set it up yourself and you're running the whole thing. But if you are doing a large event, I would also look at the size of attendees you're looking at, because some platforms do have a limit on how many people can be signed in. I would probably recommend more of that full service, robust platform that has engineers, live day support, and can hold all of your attendees, your exhibitors, and everything you're looking to do. It really depends on what your goal is and what you're looking to include.
I think it's also important to remember that, one platform is not going to fit all your needs. Just like, one venue, you still have to bring in your registration company, and you still have to bring in your AV company. I think you still have to consider those aspects as well.
Excellent point. Here's a good one. This is one we ask ourselves all the time. How do you combat that virtual event fatigue? We're all on webinars all day. We're all on Zoom all day. How do you get that creativity and the excitement that to combat that fatigue?
Oh, that's a good question.
There you go. I'm ready for your good answer.
That's a great question. And if you, I mean, again, to me, it all comes down to content, because if it's something that I really want to see, even if I've been sitting on meetings all morning, if it's something that I'm interested in, that I want to look at where I can connect with other people while I'm doing it, I'm probably going to go sit on another Zoom or another session because I want that content, that topic, that speaker is relevant to me. And again, it's your connection point. Right now, that's the only connection point you've got. To other audience members and other organizations. So I definitely feel it. I'm not going to say I don't, because I'm sure there's certain days that I get on, and in one I have this great mood, and the other I'm incredibly quiet. So I think it all comes down to your content, what you're offering out there, and what's different about your event. So like Meg said earlier, kind of look at your competition. What are they doing with their event? And really think about what quality content you're offering, because they will come if it's that important to them.
Yeah, so one of the organizations that I'm working with, we one of the best practices that we're implementing is all of our keynotes are live streamed, and then all of the breakouts are pre-recorded, so people can go and look at them when they want. We're also creating, so in the morning we have our live stream keynote, then we go into some breakouts and some other activities. All of those are pre-recorded, so if people have to go off and work, they can, and then we're bringing them back with a compelling live stream keynote after lunch, right? And then we're also doing some fun activities in the afternoon, or we're doing like a live band at night. So a lot of the tech companies do, hire these big entertainers. They're still doing that. So we're trying to give people time to do their own work or do whatever, get off of Zoom if they want to for a while, and then come, but we're bringing them back with some compelling either entertainment or keynotes that are live.
It's fun. Are you seeing good response to the musicians to bringing people back later? Are they
Yes.
returning?
Yeah, well, and they're big names. So.
Yeah, which helps. Which helps.
Right.
That's awesome. These two sort of go together. One, we talked a little bit about pricing, but can you give some rules of thumb for pricing sponsorships? We talked about different types of sponsorships, and then somewhat related, looking at the budgets and pricing for virtual and hybrid events. How do they compare? Obviously, there's a broad range, but any context that you can share would be helpful.
So is virtual and hybrid, was that question on sponsorship as well?
Just sort of general budgets and pricing, and then more generally, or more specifically, rules of thumb for pricing sponsorships.
Okay, I'll speak to some sponsorship and throw it over to you. So the pricing of sponsorship is very difficult with virtual. No rules of thumb. Like, again, I can't go and say, well, take 25% off of your in-person. That doesn't necessarily make sense. I think the biggest variable to consider is propensity to buy. So if I worked with an association where 90% of what we sold were banners. That's what the sponsors thought was valuable to them, right? So the banners were priced higher than everything else. Where there's like a DocuSign or a Cisco, I can't sell a banner. I can't give it away, right? So the propensity to buy is a big variable to take into account. I think the difficulty of implementing as well, and not just from a technical standpoint, but from a staffing resource, your staffing resources that you have to take into account. So it's hard. Here's the other factor. If you are going back to your in-person, I would be careful what the differentiator is in pricing. So you don't want to price a keynote sponsorship at $25,000 in person and then drop it to $2,500 virtual, and then try and get that same sponsor to $25,000 that next year. So be careful that you don't drop too much.
Yeah, and I would say that the virtual and hybrid pricing, that's an interesting question, because so many of your platforms, their pricing levels are different. They could be similar, but they're looking at the certain aspects, the hours you're taking, the staff they're going to have to include for your digital event, how many days. So the main difference when you're looking at hybrid pricing versus fully digital is your hybrid is actually probably going to be slightly higher, because you actually are having different vendors coming on site to be those encoders. They're streaming that to your digital event provider. which is an additional provider that you're paying for. So your hybrid ultimately is going to be a little bit more expensive because you're having those extra vendors. You probably have 2 or 3. You don't always have the same one, but with one digital event provider, let's say if you're going fully digital, that's just one cost that you're looking at. But with hybrid, you actually have some more cost elements because you're bringing other vendors and staff on site.
That's a good transition to the next question, and that is if you have a limited budget, we're actually having this discussion internally. If you have a limited budget, what's the advantage of doing a hybrid event? If you take on both the cost of doing the live event and then the platforms and other costs, it seems like a big lift. What's the payoff for the hybrid model?
It is, I mean, when you're starting out and when you're first doing it, but you can also find creative ways, like Meg was pointing out, of including sponsors, charging for content, offering different benefits of maybe sponsoring sessions. Different aspects of your event can certainly be monetized. So you'll see that come back in one way or another. But if you think about it, if you think about next year, there may not be many people that are comfortable coming to your physical event, so you're going to increase your attendance if you do have a digital or a hybrid component. So you have to kind of think outside of not everybody's going to come. Some people also may be on budget restrictions for traveling, but they still want this content. You still want to keep that connection with them. You don't want them to feel like they don't have another option. So I think in one way or another, whether it be monetization or extending your reach, you are going to see that ROI come back for including a hybrid component.
Even if it's not in the current year, but maintaining that engagement. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
And I think you're creating a succession plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have 5 people on my team and I can only send 2 people every year to your conference, now a hybrid or virtual, I can send my entire team. Mm-hmm. So now you've just started to create this succession plan of more people coming to your conference.
That's excellent. I like that succession plan and terminology and getting deeper engagement with your customers, with your attendees. Yeah. How do you know the value that you bring when you don't even know who's going to show up at the conference? And
so value, well, I would hope that you'd know your value from the prior.
Particularly if you've done these events previously, but it's an interesting question.
Right. That one threw me for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're actually dealing with that now where we're, with a couple of my groups, we are creating sometimes 5 times the amount of content that we have. But what I think is really interesting is look to your call for papers, because that'll tell you what people are wanting to hear and what's kind of trending and what's bubbling up. We went from 4, one of my associations, we went from 4 breakouts and we're offering 50 different breakouts now in a virtual world.
So it really allows you to extend. The one question we asked is how you get your line service not to be on while you're on a call like this. So I apologize for the noise in the background. Trying to wave to the young man saying, hey, I'm sorry. We talked a little bit about the virtues, the value of doing a lot of content in a full day, half day, versus spreading out over a long period of time. Have you found, as we've been through this strange period of transition, that people are willing to participate for full day events, for full day conferences, or willing to in the virtual environment?
You want to go with that first?
Yeah. So no, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not willing to. No. So what I'm seeing is no more than 4 hours a day, and even those 4 hours should be broken up a little bit. And again, the mixture between live and pre-recording is really important because you want to, Leslie's point earlier, to keep that content alive past your conference. Are you seeing anything different, Les?
No, Caitlin and I actually have this talk all the time about how long our content should be. And I don't think so, because you also want to look at, yes, I could be logged in all day. Let's say you have a 6-hour, 8-hour event. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm engaged and I'm actually doing a lot of the activities around your event. And that's important to look at when you're looking at reporting as well, is if I see that Jeff was logged in for 16 hours and I see Meg was in for 2, she's probably going to be my hotter lead because I know she came in there, she got some education, and she got what she came for. So no, I agree. I think the shorter is the way to go, especially if you do have an option to spread out that content.
And that also is shorter sessions as well. Mm-hmm. So doing a lot of 15, 20-minute, 30-minute breakouts, and then we're also doing one-on-one sessions and roundtable discussions. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to offer options for every type of learner. So when you're in a physical venue, you have limitations to how many rooms you have. When you're not, you can offer birds of a feather and breakout rooms and one-on-one chat rooms and all different types of opportunities that speak to different types of attendees.
That 20-minute window or such, and then you add on some breakout for discussion after that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
So
or the breakout is 20 minutes.
On top of the 20-minute of the presentation. So that 30 to 40 minutes of engagement is sort of the range you're looking at.
I wouldn't go any further than 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. Someone asked, how much value do you place on some of these extra engagement features of that some of the virtual conference platforms offer? We talked through a few of them, but they note that we're using Zoom here and we're not using the extra features on this call.
So I think again, that goes back to kind of you knowing your audience and their level of comfort with using polling, with using social media tools. Breakout rooms are a big thing right now. We hear a lot of people using breakout rooms after their sessions are over to foster that discussion and further it, and have kind of different groups have to facilitate it themselves. So I realize we're not using them. That's right. That's a good point. But it really goes back to knowing what they're comfortable with and what they would actually do. I think right now you're seeing a lot of people who are coming more out of their shell than they would online because they want that human interaction. That's the only interaction they've got. So they're more open to discussing and sharing their ideas than maybe just kind of backing off a little bit on certain sessions that they've been a part of. So to me, again, that goes back to your tech knowledge and your comfort level with engagement.
We talked a lot about sort of traditional conferences. We talked a little about virtual trade show booths and bringing that online. How about experience with awards programs? Have you had experience in pivoting an awards event from live to virtual, and how have you conceptualized that event, that thinking?
I have not. I don't have any experience with awards at all.
No, I think we've got that question a lot, and we just haven't seen anybody really take it on yet.
Well, we have. So we have one coming up next week, but we've done two, and we pre-recorded the event. So it was really interesting. It was really fun. So we were able to pre-record the presentation and the awards. We built in some promotional videos as sort of breaks in between. We instituted some of the experiential elements that you mentioned earlier. We sent out a celebratory box that included confetti and a cocktail recipe to drink along. We set up a really fun virtual background. But I think all those things you're talking about, making it experiential, making it fun, and just trying to make it as celebratory as possible even before the event, and then using the recording to just reduce the technical pressures of trying to produce it live was really helpful. So that's worked really well for us.
That's great.
Back to to sort of the virtual trade show with booths. What do you recommend in pricing for booth, or what do you think about when you think about pricing booths in a virtual environment versus a physical environment? I know there's a lot of different factors that be considered based on the complexity of the platform, but is there sort of a standard base price to start with, or some general context?
So there isn't. There isn't. It's just like in a physical. I couldn't tell you what the base price was for a physical either, because it depends on what your booth looks like, who's building it, all of that. Are you doing prefab? Are you doing custom? Are people bringing their own? There's too many variables involved to have a set pricing structure. I'm not a technical person, so in my head, I break it down into kind of three types of expos. There's what I talked about with the link, where you just link in and there's a directory, and it's the minimal, the least exposure you can have from an expo standpoint, all the way to the 3D avatar. But in the middle, I think is kind of where we're landing, which is 2D. And so I think that we are, as we interact on our computer more and more, it's really cool to see yourself as an avatar, and it's really cool to, you know, walk into a convention center for about 2 minutes, right? And then you're like, where's my content? I don't have time to mess around. Where's my content? So I think the 3D is a very cool option. I think we are best practices, or I guess trending or bubbling up, whatever you want to say, is really the 2D aspect. But from a pricing standpoint, it really depends on, you know, I work with organizations where a 10 by 10 is $1,500 to a 10 by 10 that is $50,000. So, you know, there's so many variables that go into pricing that. It's clearly not just the structure and not just the physical setting. There's so much more to it. So those same attributes go into account into a virtual event as well.
Can I charge more for different avatars if I want to look like Michael B. Jordan myself?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm blonde. I'm all kinds of
good revenue drivers. As we see, there's obviously some savings for our customers when we produce a virtual event. They have savings in travel and lodging.
Right.
There's some benefits: ability to attend all sessions on demand, or the recording versus only a few live. Does that justify? Have you seen that justify a higher price for virtual than a live event?
Charging higher for virtual?
For virtual, right? Because of all those benefits, you have the savings for your customer, for your attendee on one hand, and you're providing a greater benefit in terms of the ability to take in more sessions, and you know, whether it's on demand or even live.
So I haven't seen anyone charge more for virtual than live. I think I just haven't seen it. Have you, Leslie?
No, I've had a lot of people recommend against it. So I have not seen that. I think the specific groups that I've talked to are a little afraid to do that.
Yeah, it is such a new platform for us that I think the selling process, you're climbing up that hill anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if I use that as a selling tool, listen, we're saving you money on not traveling, on, you know, all these things. And normally registration is less. So, you know, you charge less for that too. So you're saving money there. You can invite more people, you know, all of those things. You really kind of need all of those tools to be able to sell. So I would highly suggest not going higher.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not for your first one.
Yeah, right. After you proof of concept for next year.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
But on the other hand, that's really cool is that all the data is showing almost 3 times, you get almost 3 times the amount of attendees in a virtual that you do in physical. So the data that's coming through is just amazing.
So that's been our experience. We've had tremendous engagement, much more so than live events, for obvious reasons. So how do you maintain that momentum? Yeah, one of the great questions about the live events has always been, how do you maintain those connections? You know, the balance of the year. Does having a hybrid or a virtual event provide new ways to continue that connectivity and providing value across the outside of the event?
I think it definitely does, because you're also looking at, and I see this a lot with my course too, people creating LinkedIn and Facebook groups off of the connections that they made at your event. So I always tell everybody to look for what we call a social media chair or a social media advocate, because they can continue that conversation probably a little bit more easily than you can, especially if they're an influencer and they've got the time to put out their perspective on your event, because you can tell everybody that your event was great, and from you, it doesn't mean as much as somebody who had this amazing experience as an influencer in the industry that they're in, and really can keep that message and that connection going. So definitely, because now with social media tools, you see a lot more people creating groups and continuing their connections that they made at your own event, and really giving you the credit for that.
And help them do that. The organization can help them create those groups, and they can get them sponsored. Win-win.
Right. Win-win for all. Win-win for all. We're closing down. We're getting towards the end, but I've got just a couple of final questions. Let's see. One is, what tools have you seen, or platforms that have helped Yeah, well, we talked a little earlier about the benefit of being face-to-face, the serendipitous organic connections that are made. How do you replicate those in a virtual environment?
So I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer chats, I think, or microsites and happy hours and things where you can put people in a smaller group to connect them. Just real quick, we did an experiential sponsorship where we sent out different colored t-shirts to all the attendees. So I had blue, you may have yellow, you may have red. And then when I logged in the morning, we all wore a t-shirt. So when I logged in the morning, I was automatically put into my blue group, and we created a name for ourselves, and we had to go through and get points for everything, and we worked as a group, right? So anytime you can either put peer-to-peer or small groups together. We're doing some happy hours where we brought in a company called Song Division, where they do like name that tune, and they do all different stuff, but they put people in groups to answer. So now you've just met, you know, a couple new people. And if you can do that throughout your event in various ways, there's a great company called Brain Dates that does amazing virtual, PCMA uses them, does amazing virtual peer-to-peer connections. So I think there's a lot of technology out there, a lot of different companies doing that.
Brain Dates, DATES, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the website is E as in Edward 180.com, I believe. The company is called E180, and it's an amazing group. They do some really cool things.
Cool, thank you. Last question before we wrap up. So what benefits of the virtual or hybrid events do you think we'll expect to see even in recovery as we begin to extricate from the quarantine, the pandemic? What do you think will carry over?
I think, like Meg said earlier, and I actually heard somebody say this on a webinar this morning too, is just your number of leads, the number of quality leads you're going to see. I feel like everybody thinks that's going away, and that's really not. It's just a different experience. So I think you're going to see a lot more sponsors being open to participating in it, especially after they see different reporting and see that quick reporting. Because with digital, the reporting turns around a lot quicker than it would with a physical event. So I think you're going to see the hesitation go away of people wanting to adopt digital, and especially sponsors wanting to go digital and participate. I think you're going to see also the benefits of just people having that lingering experience of connection in your event over a digital platform. I know some people are still hesitant about that, but just like with Brain Dates, like we were talking about, and we participated in a lot of them. Yeah. A lot of people, they went for longer, they had a lot more conversation, and it makes people open up. I think this whole situation has kind of made us go outside our comfort zone. So I think you're going to see a lot of people opening up to the different options of content you offer them.
And from a sponsorship perspective, I think you'll be able to reach more needs. So there's a lot of sponsors out there that would prefer the virtual. And then there are some that want the in-person, and now you're meeting both needs. And I think that's a great thing. And I think it opens up to, again, your attendees, the number of attendees that, 2 to 3 times is amazing.
Yeah, you can get that reach, and then also have the serendipitous conversations that come up from a live event.
One of my DocuSign, one of my clients, was one of the first groups to go virtual in the very first week of March, and they had 600 people signed up for live, and they had 10,000 people signed up for virtual.
Wow! Yeah. Wow!
Yeah.
Huh. May that be the case for everyone here, that they have those.
Right.
Thank you all for your questions. And again, I'd like to thank our experts, Leslie Bailey and Meg Fazy, for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. It was really fantastic. I also want to thank our partners at PCMA for their help organizing this informative webinar. As I mentioned at the outset, for those of you who don't know PCMA, they have a wealth of intelligence and resources about planning successful events, both in person and online, including their Digital Experience Institute and Digital Event Strategist course. So I encourage you to check out their website, www.pcma.org. It's www.pcma.org for more information, and use our code SIIA when you register. So thank you again for joining our session today. Look for more webinars in the future, and stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you soon, either virtually or in person. Thanks again.
Thank you.